make it work with my super fancy camera. The home button.
This is my work on it. Yeah, mine does too. I have like, well, because like when I lost my phone not that long ago, which was like an iPhone like 8 or something like that that I had for like probably a decade.
I think it was over 6.
Yeah, and then I got like the SE or something like that that still has a button. So I'm not a fan of the non-button one.
Yeah. I did not realize that you really cannot see that your eyesight is.
Oh, you didn't know that?
I can't remember the last time I had my eyesight is. And so I'm like in there trying to work. And then John sends me a Harvard surgery and I'm like, and then the doctor's laughing at me. And I'm just like, bro.
Yeah, what do you mean I can't work? Like, hey, how's it going, sir? Good to see you. Good to see you as well. Yeah. Do you know Audra? I think we met before. Our communications
Oh, hi.
director.
I get all of your things.
Oh, I'm sorry for spamming you.
It's okay. For a while I was getting them twice, but now I only get them once.
I think we fixed that. So, my apologies for the double spam. And hopefully that was the mailing list, not the Daily Digest that comes
Yes.
every morning. Okay,
Yes.
good, good. Cool, so is, Trump Dwayne here? Yeah. Oh, she's back there. She wanted to go. Yeah, can I have her get back to that?
This subcommittee on workforce protections will come to order, and that I will note a quorum is present. Without objection, the chair is authorized to call a recess at any point. The way people are doing work in America is changing. New platforms, technologies, and business models have transformed the way people earn a living, giving millions of workers more flexibility, autonomy, and opportunity. Whether it's freelance writers, app-based drivers, or self-employed consultants, these arrangements are helping people find work that fits their lifestyle and goals. In many cases, this flexibility leads to higher job satisfaction and better work-life balance. Unfortunately, outdated policies haven't kept pace with these changes. Too many independent workers today face legal uncertainty and unnecessary restrictions that limit their ability to work on their terms. Today, we will examine the challenges faced by freelancers, self-employed individuals, and other workers who choose to operate as independent contractors. These challenges include worker misclassification under the Fair Labor Standards Act and the fact that many independent contractors would like to have access to benefits W-2 employees typically enjoy while still taking advantage of the flexible working arrangements of an independent contractor. We've seen the damaging repercussions of restrictive state laws that prevent workers from operating as independent contractors and force them to be reclassified as traditional employees. This is especially visible after California enacted Assembly Bill 5 in 2019, which reclassified many independent contractors as employees. Due to the overwhelming negative impact, the California legislature had to exempt more than 100 professions and industries from the law. Unfortunately, states have followed California's lead with their own onerous requirements, oftentimes with disastrous results. Despite California's terrible outcomes, the Biden-Harris administration attempted to nationalize AB 5, depriving an estimated 72.7 million independent workers of clarity and consistency in the law. The 2024 independent contractor rule imposed a confusing and complicated 6-factor economic realities test to determine worker classification. These factors range from the worker's skill and initiative to his or her integral role that they play in the company's success and the degree of permanence of the relationship, among other factors, which may even include unnamed factors. This would have dramatically and drastically increased the federal government's control over the American workforce. Not only is this policy bad for independent contractors, but it is also bad for the American economy. In fact, studies estimate a total national cost of $17 billion if just 15% of independent contractors are reclassified as employees and $57 billion if 50% are reclassified. Fortunately, the Trump administration has a more common sense approach to worker classification. We look forward to working with the Department of Labor to further protect workers from unreasonable mandates like the 2024 independent contractor rule, and instead provide clear guidelines that protect legitimate independent contractors from federal overreach. Committee Republicans have solutions that we have offered as alternatives. The Modern Worker Empowerment Act, which classifies employee versus independent contractor status, and the Modern Worker Security Act, which provides a federal safe harbor to businesses wishing to offer portable benefits to independent contractors. Additionally, there are promising results from new portable benefits pilot programs that businesses are offering, one of which was announced last year by DoorDash in my home state of Pennsylvania. And our expert witnesses will discuss the latest research into portable benefits for independent contractors and how we can pass legislation that protects their status while allowing them to take advantage of newly enacted portable benefits laws, such as those in Utah, Alabama, Tennessee, and Kentucky. With that, I look forward to hearing more from the witnesses that we have here today regarding these topics, and at this time, I yield to the ranking member for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the witnesses being here today. The nation's labor laws establish basic worker protections, like a decent wage, a safe workplace, the right to organize, the right to collectively bargain, the right to overtime. But ever since workers won these protections at the federal level, big corporations have lobbied for loopholes. And those big corporations always try to sell those loopholes as, quote, good for the workers too. And that's exactly what we're dealing with here today. Huge, profitable corporations want to create more loopholes through the Congress in our labor law in order to pretend that their own employees are, quote, independent contractors. We should all be supportive of real, legitimate independent contractors and supportive of America's small businesses, while also noting that the Department of Labor has found that millions of American workers today are illegally misclassified as independent contractors when they really are employees. And when that happens to them, they are stripped of their right to overtime, minimum wage, and other basic protections. According to a 2025 study from the Economic Policy Institute, misclassification costs your average American custodial worker more than $10,000 a year. American truck drivers are deprived of about $21,000 a year when their employers misclassify them as contractors. Additionally, misclassifying workers as independent contractors costs the American taxpayer. Big corporations are skipping out on paying into Social Security and Medicare and workers' comp. Some may claim that this is all in favor of innovation or flexibility. But let's be clear, this is just good old-fashioned corporate tax dodging and union busting. The first Trump administration tried to make it easier for corporations to underpay workers and cheat taxpayers in this way. As Trump left office in January of 2021, his top officials pushed forward a rule to change the legal test about whether workers are employees or independent contractors, therefore getting a lot of employers around the protections workers have for minimum wage and overtime. The EPI estimated that 2021 Trump rule robbed workers of $3.7 billion a year in pay and benefits. The Biden administration didn't do anything radical. They just reversed us back to the rules that had been working for nearly 80 years. So then what did Trump do this time, winning a second time? He's getting rid of that Biden rule, which ultimately is actually what the American rule has been for nearly a century, and again, is making it so that big corporations, especially big tech, can get around paying their workers what it is they deserve. That is, coincidentally, right after Uber's own CEO donated about $1 million to Trump's inauguration fund. You're going to hear in today's hearing from House Republicans about companies like Uber and DoorDash wanting to provide so-called portable benefits. We all want big companies like Uber to provide people benefits, but what we're actually talking about here today is that those multi-billion-dollar companies want to create loopholes where if they offer some of those benefits, they can get around giving workers the right to a union, a right established nearly 100 years ago. They want to get around the rules that require that workers be paid a minimum wage and the right to overtime. In my view, Congress should put the American worker ahead of this kind of corporate lobbying. And here's the hypocrisy in all of this. This week, the Republican budget plan aims to take health care away from over 13 million American workers. In today's hearing, Republicans have said that they supposedly are hosting this so that workers can get a portable benefit. Well, if Republicans vote for their budget bill, millions of these gig workers will lose their health care. One of the most important earned benefits they already have is Medicaid, which they can take from employer to employer. If my Republican colleagues really cared about making sure people have benefits and health care, then they would vote no, just like the Democrats are voting no in this bill to destroy Medicaid as we know it. Join me, Mr. Chairman, please, in rejecting the bill that is up for vote this week that would take health care and benefits away from millions of your constituents and mine. I yield back.
Pursuant to Committee Rule 8C, all members who wish to insert written statements into the record may do so by submitting them to the committee clerk electronically in Microsoft Word format by 5 p.m. 14 days after this hearing. And without objection, the hearing record will remain open 14 days to allow such statements and other extraneous material noted during the hearing to be submitted for the official hearing record. I note for the subcommittee that some of my colleagues who are not permanent members of this subcommittee may be joining for today's hearing. And now for the introduction of witnesses. Our first witness is Mr. Nathan Mehrens, the Vice President of Workforce Policy at the American Trucking Association in Washington, D.C. Our second witness is Ms. Kim Caven, a freelance writer and editor from Morris County, New Jersey. Our third witness is Ms. Laura Padine, the Director of Work Structures at the National Employment Law Project in Washington, D.C. And our final witness is Dr. Leah Palagoshvili, a Senior Research Fellow for the Mercatus Center at George Mason University in Arlington, Virginia. We want to thank all of our witnesses for being here today, and we look forward to each of your testimony. Pursuant to committee rules, I will ask that each of you limit your oral testimony to a 3-minute summary of the written testimony which you have provided. As committee members may have questions for you, the clock will count down from 3 minutes. Pursuant to Committee Rule 8D, the committee practice, however, is that we will not cut off your testimony until you reach the 5-minute mark. I would also like to remind the witnesses to be aware of your responsibility to provide accurate information to the subcommittee. And with that, I recognize our first witness today, Mr. Mehrens. You are recognized for your testimony.
Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Ranking Member and members of the subcommittee. Thank you so much for the opportunity to testify today on behalf of the American Trucking Associations. It's a privilege to be with you as you consider protections for independent contractors, or as we call them, ICs. Protecting the rights of ICs is vital for our drivers, our industry, and the broader economy. In trucking, being an IC puts the individual in the driver's seat, both literally and figuratively. Truckers choose the IC model because it gives them economic opportunities and flexibility. It enables them to run their own businesses, to select their own routes, and oftentimes make more money. Here are a couple of examples. Pamela Wilday is a trucker from Pennsylvania who became an IC a decade ago because it gave her the time that she needed to raise her daughter and also to be a caregiver for her family. Her income has lifted her family's fortunes and enabled them to buy a home. Lou Alcone is an IC trucker from Minnesota. He grew up in South Sudan and came to the U.S. as an orphaned refugee. He earned his commercial driver's license, became a company driver, and eventually purchased his own truck. He calls it his American dream, and he looks forward to passing his business on to his son one day. Across the nation, there are hundreds of thousands of stories like these. These ICs do what they do. It's because it's what they want to do. We know from BLS data that ICs overwhelmingly approve of their work arrangement. More than 80% approve of this, and less than 10% are interested in being employees. There are not a lot of 80-20 issues out there, so this isn't surprising for our industry because we know that drivers earn good livings while retaining freedom to decide when and where they work. But unfortunately, their way of life is under attack from policymakers at both the federal and state levels. The Biden administration rewrote the standard for classifying ICs under the Fair Labor Standards Act, replacing what was a fairly straightforward test from the first Trump administration with one that significantly muddied the waters. The Secretary of Labor recently took steps to rescind this Biden-era rule, and we strongly welcome this and urge the department to move quickly to reinstate the standard from the first Trump administration. But changing standards from administration to administration pose significant compliance issues for everyone. To ensure that ICs can continue to engage in their chosen vocations, we need legislative solutions urgently. And one such solution is the Modern Worker Empowerment Act, which, if enacted, would codify essentially the common sense framework from the first Trump administration, make it easier for everyone to know how the law applies. Congress must also reject threats to ICs, such as the PRO Act, which would double down on California's failed experiment of AB 5, which has been disastrous for ICs in that state. In closing, trucking has been described as the backbone of America's economy. We have America's backs. The administration has made clear that they have our backs on this issue, and now we ask for you to have our backs. Stand ready to work with Congress on this, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will recognize Ms. Caven for her testimony.
Thank you, Chairman McKenzie and Mr. Ranking Member, for this chance to testify about what we've learned since I was first here 2 years ago. I'm a co-founder of the grassroots coalition Fight for Freelancers. Several of us freelance writers created the group in 2019 after California passed a law called Assembly Bill 5. That deeply misguided law kicked off a wave of freelance busting that targeted our home state of New Jersey next, and ever since then, the whole country. Today, independent contractors in all kinds of professions are raising our voices because this kind of policymaking directly targets our livelihoods. Our opponents keep saying it will protect workers by stopping misclassification, but the evidence shows the main effect is hurting independent contractors. Freelance busting now threatens the incomes and careers of tens of millions of Americans by way of the Federal PRO Act, U.S. Labor Department rulemaking, and right now, in New Jersey, proposed rulemaking that a top labor attorney warns will eliminate every single independent contractor in the state. This is not reasonable policymaking, and at this point, it's clear that these harms are intentional. Attorney review of what's happening in New Jersey includes words like eviscerate. Lawyers say these interpretations far exceed general norms. In California, a state assemblyman called for the U.S. Department of Justice to investigate discrimination in this policymaking. Members of the California Advisory Committee to the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights described this as a seismic change in policy with a decidedly negative impact on women, immigrants, people of color, and other disadvantaged groups politically. The promise is always new jobs and union members. Reality is the opposite. The Orange County Register compared 5 years prior to the California law with 5 years after and found an 81% decline in the pace of job creation. As for union membership, federal data shows it also went down, and independent contractors got hurt. Research by economist Leah Palagashvili, who's testifying here today, showed that on average for affected professions, not only did self-employment take a 10.5% hit in California, but overall employment dropped too. I'm no expert economist, but I know what it looks like when you hurt people. New Jersey's proposed rule says point blank, the independent contractor restrictions won't create a single job. That's not protecting me. It's wiping out my 22-year freelance career and leaving me with nothing. Yes, it's wrong to misclassify employees, but it's also wrong to force independent contractors out of business when federal data shows the vast majority of us prefer our way of achieving the American dream. A decade of data shows this is beyond 80-20. It's a 90-10 common sense issue. Congress must protect our fundamental freedom to earn a living. Please pass the Modern Worker Empowerment Act and add preemption of state independent contractor laws. Stop these attacks on our livelihoods once and for all. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I will recognize Ms. Patton for your testimony.
Thank you, Chair McKenzie. Thank you, Chair McKenzie, Ranking Member Kassar, and members of the subcommittee. My name is Laura Padine, and I'm the Director of Work Structures at the National Employment Law Project, a nonprofit organization dedicated to building a good jobs economy, one rooted in the fundamental belief that every job should be a good job. I'd like to share a quote from Nicole Moore, a rideshare driver and president of Rideshare Drivers United. Lyft and Uber have called us independent contractors since the beginning, but we really aren't independent. There's so little we control. Yes, we can work when we want and choose not to accept some rides, but the algorithms behind these apps are basically 21st century robot bosses. They determine how much we earn, if we earn it at all, and really when we can earn. These same algorithms can even fire us. Across the country, corporations are mislabeling the workers powering their businesses as independent contractors, even though the workers are not running their own businesses and the corporations make key decisions, such as where, how, and for how much money workers perform their jobs. Corporations misclassify workers to shift the risks and costs of their business onto their workers and drive down labor costs. Misclassification deprives workers of core rights and protections, including minimum wage, overtime, employer contributions to Social Security, the right to collectively bargain, and workers' compensation. Misclassification is rampant in many occupations where the work is already underpaid and difficult, including home care, janitorial work, delivery, construction, and more recently, app dispatch jobs. It's no coincidence that Black, immigrant, and other workers of color who face discrimination and occupational segregation are overrepresented in these jobs. And the evidence shows that misclassification is making these already difficult jobs worse. A study of the incomes of independent contractors in 11 low-paying industries, including construction, home health care, and transportation, found that independent contractors are paid half to two-thirds of what employees in the same industries make. A study of independent contractors' tax filings in D.C. found that a majority earn under $22,000 a year, and the most common occupations are janitors, drivers, and hairstylists. Many misclassified workers are living paycheck to paycheck, an accident or illness away from financial disaster, and without the means to take a break from work or retire. Corporations are now using technology to automate supervision and disguise the many ways they control working conditions, even as they disclaim their responsibilities as employers. Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, and Amazon use digital labor platforms and apps and algorithms to offer shifts or assignments to workers, set their wages, surveil and assess their performance, and deactivate them. Industry speak for suspensions or firings if they don't meet standards. Like other so-called independent contractors, the earnings of app-based ride-hail and delivery workers are shockingly low, often below the minimum wage for the localities in which they work. And despite working in occupations with high health and safety risks, these workers have no support systems through their jobs, no paid leave, no employer-provided health insurance, no workers' comp if they get sick or injured. Employers who misclassify their workers can save between 20 to 40% in payroll costs. This puts businesses that are doing the right thing and classifying their workers as employees at a competitive disadvantage. And federal and state programs lose out on billions of dollars in tax revenue that fund critical programs like unemployment insurance. Finally, I'd like to talk about portable benefits, which some app-based companies claim they want to offer their workers. DoorDash implemented what it calls a portable benefits savings pilot in Pennsylvania, which is just a savings account DoorDash sets up for eligible drivers. This savings account dressed up as portable benefits does not replace the benefits of employment. For one thing, delivery workers earn poverty wages, so can't save any of their own money in these accounts. The bigger issue, though, is that savings accounts are no substitute for insurance-based benefits, such as unemployment insurance, health insurance, and workers' compensation. By pooling risk, these insurance programs provide the stability that allow working people to weather emergencies that would otherwise be financially catastrophic. Congress should not legitimize these fake portable benefit programs. Instead, it should strengthen our existing portable benefits programs, Medicaid, Social Security, and unemployment insurance, and promote other real models of portable benefits like union-negotiated multi-employer health and pension plans. Congress can also promote policies that truly empower working people, like livable wages and stable and predictable schedules, paid time off, including vacation, sick leave, and family leave, meaningful benefits like unemployment insurance, health insurance, Medicaid, Social Security and retirements, and the right to collectively bargain. Thank you.
Thank you. Lastly, I will recognize Dr. Palagashvili for your testimony.
Good morning, Chairman Mackenzie, Ranking Member, and members of the committee. My name is Dr. Leah Palagashvili, and I'm a labor economist at the Marketa Center at George Mason University. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. First, not all jobs come in the same size and shape, and that's a good thing. Last year, 90% of all U.S. jobs were traditional W-2 jobs, and only about 10% of jobs were independent jobs, such as freelancing, consulting, or gig work. National data show a steady coexistence of both independent and W-2 jobs, meaning that the two workforces are not in conflict. They operate side by side, meeting different needs within a diverse labor market. In fact, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, fewer than 9% of all independent workers actually seek a W-2 job. That's why it's important that worker classification laws strike the right balance between being strong enough to address misclassification and not so restrictive that they deny legitimate freelancers the ability to work. Overly restrictive rules like ABC tests fail at meeting that balancing act. In California, these policies were associated with significant job losses for freelancers without an accompanying increase in W-2 jobs for them. Additionally, in our nationwide study using data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, my research team found that ABC tests caused a 6.4% decline in self-employment and, importantly, a 4.7% drop in W-2 jobs. Now, these results are causal, meaning we can definitively say that ABC tests cause these negative outcomes. No other studies to date have found positive employment effects from these laws. The research shows that restrictive ABC tests do not create more work opportunities. They eliminate both independent and W-2 jobs. Instead, 80% of independent workers have asked for a more promising solution, the desire to access portable benefits. But here's the challenge. While our workforce is dynamic, our benefit system is not. Most benefits remain tied to a single employer and a traditional job structure, leaving millions of independent workers without access. That's partly because current law discourages companies and clients from offering support. If a business voluntarily provides benefits to an independent worker, it risks triggering legal reclassification into an employee status. That legal risk makes it nearly impossible to build a new benefits model that match a new and flexible workforce. Congress can fix this. A straightforward reform clarifying that the presence of benefits should not be used in employment classification determinations would clear the way for clients or companies to voluntarily contribute to workers' benefits account without the legal risk. States have already started to forge this path. Maryland, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Utah, Tennessee, and Alabama have made reforms that legalize access to benefits for independent workers, paving the way for bipartisan portable benefits pilot programs. In Pennsylvania, for example, DoorDash is voluntarily contributing 4% of drivers' earnings into an individual benefits account managed by the company Stride. While some may fear that portable benefits would negatively disrupt W-2 jobs, research shows that is not the case. Using Census Bureau data, my research team found that after Utah passed its 2023 portable benefits law, both W-2 employment and self-employment continued to grow at the same pace as before, showing that this reform gave more workers access to benefits without harming W-2 jobs. In short, portable benefits are a promising bipartisan solution. They allow properly classified independent workers, the vast majority of whom wish to remain independent, access to more financial security without sacrificing the type of jobs that they desire. Portable benefits modernize our labor policies in a way that supports how people actually work today. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Under Committee Rule 9, we will now ask questions of the witnesses under the 5-minute rule, and I will recognize myself first. My first question goes to Mr. Marins. There are about 350,000 American truckers who are owner-operators. How does the trucking industry navigate laws in California, New Jersey, Massachusetts, and other states where they've made it nearly impossible to operate as an independent truck driver?
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the question. In California in particular, it is next to impossible for an owner-operator to work for a motor carrier. The law is just so restrictive. If you look at the ABC test and the B prong of that in particular, if you're doing work that's in the normal course of business of the hiring entity as an IC, it just doesn't work in California. So it's been very difficult for our members. Some of them have left the state, some of them have had to change business models, and the individual drivers themselves have been injured, to say the least.
And I'll go to Dr. Palagashvili. These 9 states that have enacted an ABC test, which severely limits the circumstances under which an individual can work as an independent contractor. In your written testimony, you discussed that the study found the job losses seen in those states were a result of that ABC test rigidity. Does this serve as a warning for other states, and what do you think we can learn as a federal body?
Yes, so we did the first ever empirical study looking at the ABC tests across states that have adopted them. Like I said, the results are causal, meaning we can definitively say that the ABC test caused these negative results. We believe other states that adopt them, especially with the stricter version B prong of the ABC test, will lead to negative results both for independent workers and W-2 employees. And as I mentioned in my testimony, worker classification laws require a balancing act to go after bad faith misclassification, but also not to be so restrictive that they prevent legitimate freelancers from working. The ABC tests fail at meeting that balancing act.
Thank you for that testimony. That's a pretty strong statement, showing a direct causal result for job losses because of these ABC tests. That should be a very strong lesson for everybody else to learn. Ms. Cavan, your written testimony highlights the significant difference between policies that prevent the misclassification of employees and policies that attack entrepreneurs who prefer being their own boss. And we heard 80% of independent contractors enjoy that work environment, 80%, 80+%. What recommendations do you have for the subcommittee that could draw a line between preventing misclassification and harming independent entrepreneurs?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman. My biggest recommendation is to have actual independent contractors at the policymaking table. If you look at who sits on these misclassification task forces and who's writing these misclassification reports and who's writing all these bills and all these rules, you almost never see actual independent contractors involved, and especially not from the majority of us who prefer to be self-employed. One member of my group, Fight for Freelancers, her name is Brittany Vanderbilt. She's amazing. She's from Minnesota, and she managed to get on a task force on misclassification out there recently. Her experience was startling, and we did a whole Q&A about it so people could understand. She said things like, whenever I brought up the fact that independent contracting offers freedom and flexibility, other task force members or agency members would immediately try to downplay and discredit the argument. She said the idea that independent contractors choose to be independent contractors was another thing that constantly got shot down whenever it was brought up. The level of dismissiveness and disdain toward independent contractors in this kind of policymaking, it's absolutely breathtaking. So to me, the biggest change that could be made all across the country, state and federal level, is to give professional, successful independent contractors a seat at the table and make those seats meaningful.
Thank you. Next, I will recognize our ranking member for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Chairman. My experience in Austin, Texas, recently, I think, shows why it's so important for us to ensure that when contractors are indeed employees and not fully and true small business owners, that these oftentimes are used as loopholes by some of the biggest corporations in the country. For example, at YouTube Music in my district, they organized a union and asked Google, who owns YouTube, to come to the bargaining table. These workers were making as little as $19 an hour for tech jobs in a city where average rent is more than $1,500 a month. But instead of bargaining with these workers in good faith, Google hid behind the contractor who employed these workers, who hid behind their contract with Google, claiming that these workers were exclusively, on their own, that Google had no responsibility for them. The National Labor Relations Board sided with the workers, saying Google and the contractor were actually employers, and then Google fired the workers instead of complying with the NLRB's ruling. And so we need to be having hearings about how, yes, we can protect and support independent businesses, small businesses, and self-employed people while ensuring that we don't push for rules and laws that would make it so that the Googles of the world don't actually have to negotiate with their workers and follow over a century of labor law. Ms. Padin, is it correct that in 2021, the Trump administration made it easier for real employees to be misclassified illegally as contractors?
Forgetting to do that. Yeah, so in 2021, the Trump administration adopted a independent contractor rule that essentially elevated two factors and said they were more important than other factors that the Supreme Court and circuit courts have used for decades. And that rule really wasn't supported by precedent. And it focused on in particular a control factor, but in a way that was very narrow. It talked about whether a hiring entity exercised control, not whether it had the right to control. And right to control is really important because we see big companies like Uber and Amazon reserve the right to control in their contracts, and that can really limit how a true independent business person would operate.
Thank you. And we've heard a lot just now here about the ABC test, which some state governments have used while the federal government has not. But can you explain how the ABC test has protected workers in some of the states that use it? I think we've heard some of the other side on this, but can you tell us how, in your view, the ABC test has played out in these states?
Sure. Well, let me just say, first of all, the ABC test is different from the Biden administration's independent contractor rule. The ABC test is broader, and it starts with a presumption that someone is an employee. And that actually makes a lot of sense because most people are working for someone else. They're not in business for themselves. So it starts with a presumption, and that presumption can be rebutted by the hiring entity if 5 factors are found. So if 3 factors are found, excuse me. So it is a broad protective test that ensures people who are employees are classified that way.
Thank you. Now let's talk about the platform workers and gig workers. In my home state of Texas, platform workers like DoorDash and Uber drivers have been found by a recent study to oftentimes be making as little as $5 an hour. You hear about it all the time, people waiting for hours and hours at work to get a ride. That is so much less than the federal minimum wage of $7.25 and so much less than what the city of Austin says should be the minimum wage of about $20 an hour. Ms. Padin, do you expect the portable benefits offered by some of these companies to measure up to benefits offered by Medicare, Medicaid, or any kind of comprehensive health insurance plan?
No, not at all. I mean, portable benefits is a misnomer for what these companies are offering. So, I mentioned the DoorDash program, and it's come up a couple of times in this hearing. It is a savings account that DoorDash sets up for eligible workers. DoorDash contributes 4% of workers' pre-tip earnings to the account. That amounts to about $31 a month. $31 is not a meaningful contribution to the types of emergencies, like disability or sickness, that true benefits are intended to cover. And again, these savings accounts are no substitute for insurance-based benefits like Social Security, Medicaid, and unemployment insurance, which are portable, and other insurance-based employment benefits like workers' comp and health insurance that pool risk and thereby help people weather emergencies that would otherwise destroy them.
And so, in summary, we're hearing companies like DoorDash say, we want to give you a benefit, $31 a month towards health, so that they can get out of paying you overtime or a minimum wage or letting you have a union. To me, that's just classic union-busting behavior. And instead of catering to the DoorDashes of the world, maybe we should try to block this Republican proposal to kick 13 million workers off of their health care. And that proposal apparently is coming to us this week. I yield back.
Next, we'll go to Chairman of the Full Committee, Mr. Wahlberg from Michigan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to the panel for being here. Mr. Marin, your written testimony cites a 2021 study by American Transportation Research Institute, which found independence, schedule flexibility, choice of routes, and length of haul to be the key motivating factors behind choosing to be an independent trucker. On the other side, truck drivers who are traditional employees valued job security, income, and benefits, a different set of benefits that they're looking for. This seems to make clear that independent truck drivers value different workplace priorities than employees. Could you discuss whether the federal government should allow independent truckers to continue as entrepreneurs?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the question. Absolutely, the federal government should allow ICs to continue in their occupations. As I noted in my testimony, it's what they choose. In our industry, we have plethora of jobs available if you're a driver. If you want to be an employee driver, we have a position for you. If you want to be an entrepreneur, create your own business, set up something that you can pass down to your family, we have opportunities for you there as well. It's really up to the individual in our industry. There are 2 paths. They're both valid. Some work better for others. If you have more of an entrepreneurial bent to you and want to create your own business, have the schedule flexibility that you like, have all kinds of additional options that you don't have as an employee, that path is there for you. If, on the other hand, you want a set routine, you want to have a set route, you want to do the same thing day in and day out because that's what your personal circumstance is best for you, we have opportunities there for you as well.
Or have a start like the story you illustrated with of
Yes.
person coming to the country, starting out as an employee, and ultimately making enough to become an independent trucker.
Yes, we definitely see that as well, that individuals who start as employees, realize that they could have their own business in this field and go down that path.
And they could go back the other way, too.
Absolutely.
But they have choices.
They do.
Which is great. Thank you. Dr. Palagashvili, I hope I got that close. Your testimony says that instead of pursuing restrictive worker classification laws like those contained in the ABC test, policymakers should consider reforms that make it easier for independent workers to access portable benefits. What problems are there in current law that restrict and discourage offering portable benefits?
Thank you for the question, Representative. Currently, if anybody provides a benefit to an independent worker, if you're a client, if you're a company, regulators at the state level and at the federal level will see that, and that's a check mark for the employee side. So that creates a huge legal risk and liability of reclassifying the worker as an employee. So that makes it nearly impossible for anybody who wants to voluntarily contribute benefits into these to independent workers to do so. That's why anywhere where we've seen portable benefits accounts open up, it's been either through legislative changes or through a governor approving these programs, such as in Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Georgia.
Again, expanding choice, an opportunity. Okay, thank you. Ms. Cavan, I would not want to be a freelance writer because I'd starve. But you want to be that, as well as others like you. In your written testimony, you use the term freelance busting and outlines associated negative impacts for individuals who choose to operate as independent contractors like yourself, who thrive on that. Why did you originally decide to become an independent contractor?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a few reasons. It was more than 20 years ago. I'd already spent a decade in staff jobs, newspaper and magazine staff jobs. I'll tell you about just two of the reasons that stand out to me. One was business opportunity. I got into a staff position in the marine magazines, which are about boats, all kinds of boats, little kayaks right on up to the biggest boats you can imagine. And what I realized was that they had staffs full of guys who knew everything in the world you could possibly know about a boat, how to drive it, build it, design it, sell it, wash it, wax it, whatever. But things like spelling a caption correctly in an article was a little bit more challenging for those folks. So my skill set joined with their skill set, I could make a lot more money working as a freelancer for multiple magazines that needed that kind of skill set. That turned out to be a really good bet. The other reason I'll tell you about, and it's a little bit scary, and I want to preface it by saying I'm sitting right here, and I'm okay today, but many years ago, back in the 1990s, I was walking into my apartment building after work one night at the newspaper, and a man that I didn't know, he had been in and out of hospitals and mental institutions and jails for about 20 years. He was off his meds. He'd recently been in an altercation with a police officer. He was having visions of women drowning in pools of blood, and he had gotten hold of a serrated kitchen knife. And he came up behind me as I was walking into my apartment building. And I remember the knife coming around the front, and I remember waking up on the ground and having to fight for my life. And not too long after that, I was diagnosed with acute and severe post-traumatic stress disorder, which is a very normal response to a situation like that happening to a person. One of the things that helped me recover from PTSD was being able to be my own boss, because when you're your own boss, you can control your entire work environment. Nobody's going to come up behind you in an office, tap you on a shoulder, and ask you a question and startle you. Little things like that would be very difficult for me at that time, all day long. But working from home, I could just work. I could write, I could edit. I like to be a writer. You're right, I enjoy it. And I could just do that, and I could get better. And what bothers me so much about what's going on with this freelance busting, there's so many of us who have stories, maybe not identical to mine, but we have women dealing with cancer diagnosis that are trying to deal with going to the hospital. We have moms taking care of kids who are in need because they have special needs and they're looking for flexibility that way. Maybe we have members of Fight for Freelancers who are taking care of elderly parents and
Again,
things.
I wish we had more time, but time is up. But
Sorry.
again, this is an example of choice.
Yes.
That works for you.
Yes.
And very successfully.
Yes.
And thank you for taking the risk to come here today as well and share that story.
People seem okay so far behind me. so-
Good. Thank you so much. I yield back.
Thank you. Next, we will go to the ranking member of the full committee, Mr. Scott from Virginia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Paula Vescili, your testimony refers to the analysis of the impact of the ABC test in multiple states. My staff consulted several economists and couldn't find any who had replicated your results. Would you be willing to make the underlying data and methods of your analysis public?
Absolutely. We haven't, the full study is not publicly available right now, but I think that's probably why they couldn't replicate it. But we can, the data is the Census Bureau and the Bureau of Labor Statistics data. We put all the methods up
Will you be able to
online.
make that public so people could see what the data
Absolutely,
is?
yes. Thank you for your question.
Thank you. Ms. Padin, just to go over the difference between employees and independent contractors so people know, if you're an employee, the employer makes a contribution to your Social Security. If you're an independent contractor, does the employer is there any employer contribution, or do you have to make the whole contribution yourself?
They make the whole contribution themselves.
Do you have a right to organize if you're an independent contractor?
No,
Do you get minimum wage or overtime?
no,
If you lose your job, do you get unemployment compensation?
no,
Someone suggested that you're one injury away from disaster. If you're hurt on the job, do you get workers' compensation to cover medical expenses, lost wages, or any disability compensation?
no,
Are you entitled as an independent contractor to a safe workplace enforced by OSHA?
no,
Are you entitled to protection from discrimination by the EEOC under Title VII?
no, you're not.
If employees get health insurance or pension at the place of employment, if you are an independent contractor, do you get access to those benefits?
You don't.
How does sick leave work if you're an independent contractor?
You don't get sick leave as an employee, as an independent contractor.
Child labor laws are enforced by the Wage and Hour Division of the Department of Labor. If a child is an independent contractor, who would enforce that law?
No one.
You mentioned savings by the employer. If you can get somebody misqualified as an independent contractor, you'd save a lot of money.
Right, estimates are between 10 to 30% in payroll costs.
In terms of benefits, if you have an IRA and access to the Affordable Care Act, that's essentially the benefits you'd get in a benefit package anyway as an independent contractor. What do these portable benefits add to that?
I don't think the portal benefits really add anything. I think companies have been offering them in response to worker organizing around the country. Ride-hail and delivery workers are organizing to demand better wages and working conditions, and I think these companies are offering these kind of second-rate fake portable benefit programs as a response to quell these demands.
But if you have an IRA and Affordable Care Act, they'd be offering you some kind of defined contribution plan on a portable, I don't know what portable actually means, but you'd get health insurance. You're not really getting anything else with these little plans.
No, thus far, the portable benefits plans that have been offered are savings accounts.
Now, are there any studies that show who actually chooses to be an independent contractor and who chooses to be an employee?
That's a great question. So a lot of these surveys, it really depends how the question is asked. There are surveys that find that when asked, do you want to be an independent contractor or an employee, there generally is higher favorability for independent contractor. But studies that ask people, do you want to be covered by minimum wage? Do you want your hiring entity to contribute to Social Security for you? That asks you about the benefits of employment and if you want them to show high favorability for employment status.
And so when they find out what the implications are, nobody chooses to be an independent contractor.
Well, more people, yes. When people want the benefits that come with employment, more so, yes.
Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record an article from February 2025 of the Monthly Labor Review on what the data says about whether workers or firms actually control the choice over who is an independent contractor.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Mr. Mesmer from Indiana.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the witnesses for being here today. Mr. Marin, in your written testimony, it says the 2024 Department of Labor independent contractor rule effectively discourages efforts to improve drivers' health and safety. Can you explain how this rule has such a perverse effect?
Thank you, Congressman. Yes. The 2021 rule that the 2024 rule is rescinded, the 2021 rule had specific examples in the Code of Federal Regulations, in the actual regulatory text itself, that stated that when you have a contract between two entities and there are health and safety requirements that are made part of that contract, that those provisions themselves would not cause the individual to lose their status as an independent contractor. The 2024 rule removed those provisions from the regulations and significantly muddied the waters on that question.
Okay. How would the Modern Worker Empowerment Act cut red tape and help trucking industry promote health and safety?
So the Modern Worker Empowerment Act, looks at the two core factors that were in the 2021 rule, level of control and entrepreneurial opportunity, and it also has language that mirrors that previous version that was in the CFR that talks about contractual provisions relating to health and safety and compliance with other laws as well would not be deemed the level of control that would negate the IC relationship. So it would protect that relationship.
Okay, thank you. Also in that Modern Worker Empowerment Act, it proposes using two primary factors to determine independent contractor status. Why do you believe this strikes a balance between the workforce and the business owner?
If you look at what the ultimate inquiry here is whether the individual is in business for themselves. And those two factors, were found in the 2021 rule as, quote, more probative on the question of whether there was economic dependence by the individual on the contract, or the contracting entity over the individual. So if you look at the level of control and the level of entrepreneurial opportunity that exists, those two factors really do get to the core of whether this individual is in business for themselves.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Cavan, in your written testimony, you discussed a flawed, outdated analysis claiming up to 30% of independent contractors in the United States are misclassified. Can you explain why this analysis is flawed?
Thank you, Congressman. Yeah, I had seen an article a little over a year ago. It was in Newsweek. It was actually written by Ms. Padin's boss, the president and CEO of NELP, and it stated that a 2020 analysis found that 10 to 30% of employers misclassify employees as independent contractors. And those words, a 2020 analysis, they were a hyperlink, but they didn't go to a 2020 analysis. They actually went to a 2009 GAO report that, if you actually go and dig it up and read it, which I did, says the national extent of employee misclassification is unknown, and then it refers to data that's as old as 1984. Now, I was 12 years old in 1984. We didn't even have laptop computers and smartphones. Why the heck are we making independent contractor policy here in the year 2025 based on data from 1984? This makes no sense.
Okay, thank you very much. Dr. Palagashvili, in your written testimony, you indicate nearly 90% of U.S. jobs were traditional W-2 jobs last year. Based on your research, are independent contractor roles replacing traditional work?
Thank you for your question, Representative. No, they're not replacing. The data shows that there's a steady coexistence and growth with both of them. And actually, it's not even my data. There is an IRS study on the IRS website right now The title of the study is called, Is Gig Work Replacing Traditional Employment? The answer is no. And so if you look at any way you can spin the data, even EPI has, Economic Policy Institute looks at it as well, that a lot of the independent workforce is actually supplemental income. So most, and that's what the IRS report found too, most independent workers already have full-time W-2 jobs, and they're using independent work as an opportunity to make extra income as side gigs, so to speak. And so I've looked at the data, IRS report is up on there, BLS data, Census Bureau data. Right now, it shows that independent work and W-2 employment are coexisting together.
Thank you. I yield back the rest of my time.
Thank you. Next, I'll go to Mr. Takano.
Thank you. Ms. Badin, do you want to respond to any of the claims that the other witnesses have just made?
Sure, of course. I'll respond to Ms. Cavan's claim because I think she was saying we misrepresented something or cited a study that was outdated. So that figure, the 10 to 30% figure, cites to the Planmatic study, which is the last time DOL did a national comprehensive study of the scope of misclassification. And I would love for the DOL to do a new, rigorous, apolitical study on the scope of misclassification. And perhaps Ms. Cavan would like to join me in petitioning them for that. But in the absence of that, we also have much more recent state data that looks at the extent of misclassification. So for instance, Maryland's task force on misclassification published a report earlier this year. It found through random audits that 35% of home health care workers are misclassified, 20% of workers in landscaping, 19% of workers in janitorial work. Pennsylvania's Joint Task Force on Misclassification from 2022 found 48,000 employers in Pennsylvania misclassified at least one employee. Virginia's Legislative Audit and Review Commission in 2010 found based on a random audit of 1.1% of all employers in the state, that a quarter of these employers had misclassified at least one worker. So again, we don't have updated data from the DOL. That is an old study. And again, I'd love for the DOL to do a new study, but state audits also confirm that misclassification is rampant.
Well, thank you, Ms. Badin. You said to Ranking Member Scott in his response, and I'll ask the question again, are independent contractors subject to minimum wage laws?
They are not.
And do independent contractors earn overtime pay?
No, they're not entitled to it.
So in this terrible, I don't call it a big, beautiful tax bill that they're trying to ram through the Congress in the middle of the night this week, my Republican colleagues, the provisions which would not tax overtime pay, that wouldn't apply to any independent contractor, would it?
That's correct.
So independent contractors would not benefit from this that provision in this tax bill.
That's right.
Do independent contractors have protections for labor organizing?
No.
It seems to me that workers that are classified as independent contractors are not entitled to those protections, but it'd be one thing if these workers were truly meeting the definition of independent contractors, and that's the whole issue of misclassification, right? If they had significant control over their own work, if they were in business for themselves, if they were being compensated adequately for their labor and so forth. And to be clear, independent contractors, some independent contractors do meet these criteria, but for too many of these independent contractors, they are subject to misclassification. And that means that these workers aren't covered by basic protections or subject to equitable wage laws. Ms. Badin, what does the data tell us about the extent of misclassification and the costs it imposes on workers and their families? It's a bit of a different question, but...
Yeah, so I talked a little bit about what we know about the data from state task force, right? There's the Maryland data that I just discussed, which found that workers very high rates of misclassification, particularly in low-paying occupations like home health care work, landscaping, janitorial work, construction work. Pennsylvania and Virginia's task force similarly found very high levels of misclassification. So what does this all cost? Well, EPI did an analysis of different jobs when workers are classified as independent contractors and employees, and found that independent contractor status can cost workers thousands of dollars in lost benefits like unemployment insurance and in additional expenses independent contractors incur, like paying the employer's share of Social Security. It also costs federal and state governments billions of dollars in tax revenue. A report from 2009 report estimated it was $2.72 billion in federal revenue that's lost.
It seems like there's a very circumscribed set of circumstances that make independent contracting, an advantageous situation. But for many, many workers, it just puts them in a very disadvantaged position. How will cutting the benefits like Medicaid and Social Security impact the gig economy and misclassified workers?
That's a great question. So, a lot of members of Congress say they want to promote portable benefits, but House Republicans are planning to gut one of the most effective portable benefits programs we have, Medicaid. 1 in 5 people in our country get health insurance through Medicaid. Half of children are covered through Medicaid. Medicaid is also a job provider, paying the wages of thousands of home health care aides and other direct care workers. I also want to point out that Medicaid is a lifeline to many so-called independent contractors. Again, I say so-called because if you're making that little money, it probably means you aren't setting or negotiating the rates for your services, so that's a strong signal that you're misclassified. So many independent contractors are covered by Medicaid. So for instance, a study by Stride Health, which partners with lots of gig companies to offer so-called independent portable benefits, found that a survey of 18,000 app-based gig workers found a quarter of them get health insurance through Medicaid. Other studies confirm this. A study I cited in my testimony of independent contractors in 11 low-paying industries found that 24% of these independent contractors rely on Medicaid. So again, cutting this program is hurting the people, the independent contractors that folks say here they don't want to support.
Well, thank you. Sorry I went over, but I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Fine from Florida.
Well, thank you. I find some of the testimony a little bit puzzling. So I'm not much of a politician, but I spent 22 years starting, building, and growing companies. I was an independent contractor, and I hired a number of them. I also employed many or contracted with many. So I have a question. So for Ms. Padin, and I apologize if I didn't get your name right.
Oh, that's
so
fine. Yeah, that's
full unemployment by economists, which I also used to teach, is considered 4 to 5%. In the state of Florida, our unemployment rate right now is 3.6%. So my question to you is, are people, are you obligated to be an independent contractor? You're stuck. You can't quit the job, the independent contracting gig, and go get a job. Like if I'm not happy with the terms at Uber, by law, we're forcing them to stay in that. They're like indentured servants, because I don't understand. Under full employment would suggest there's lots of other opportunities for them in Florida. So they're stuck. We've mandated them that they have to work in these horrible conditions that you've laid out today.
There just aren't that many other good jobs out there.
Okay,
right?
the data would suggest that not from 1984, but from 2025 would suggest that that's not the case. One of my experiences in hiring independent contractors, I often found, and I think it's why the left doesn't like independent contractors, because when they found out what they would get paid, when they found out what it cost a company to hire them as an employee, they typically got angry. So I often didn't pay my employees, this was pre-Obamacare, I often didn't give my employees health insurance. I gave them money to buy their own health insurance, even though it wasn't tax advantaged, because I saw them get so angry about what health insurance costs. See, benefits and all of these things, what people value what they get in their check that they bring home. Maybe they value their gross pay. Most people just benefit their net pay. Some people value their gross pay. None of them value the 30, 40, 50% that the employer pays on top of it in order to hire them as employees. And I think that's why the left likes it. It's inherently a tax. I found that folks like to be independent contractors. They would say, I don't want all that stuff. I just want take-home pay. So my question is to Ms. Cavan. You know, surveys show that independent workers are happier than if they were employees because they can pick their own hours. And contrary to what we may believe, they can choose to switch being an independent contractor or something. MBO Partners estimates that the number of independent contractors making more than $100,000 annually, and by the way, they not only make $100,000 annually, they can write off certain things associated with their independent contracting. You probably write off your laptop, your internet access at home, maybe the part of your house that's an office. You get to write that off too. Wouldn't get to do it if you were an employee, but you can as an independent contractor. So they're not only making more than $100,000 annually, it rose from $3 million in 2020 to $4.7 million in 2024. That's, you know, over 50%. So clearly people like it. How would you recommend Congress ensure more workers continue to see that kind of income growth?
It's nice to meet you. Thank you for the question. I am one of those successful independent contractors, and the thing that has cost me more time and money than anything else since 2019 is having to come to places like this on my own time and my own dime to rebut some of the things that are coming from the opposition. Ms. Padin wants to talk about the Planmatics study. She thinks 1984 is too old. Well, the Planmatics study's data was done back in the 1990s. Not much recent either. The Planmatics study also didn't interview any independent contractors. It did include the viewpoints of the AFL-CIO and the Economic Policy Institute, which claim that the typical career paradigm is characterized by lifetime employment with a single employer, steady advances up the job ladder, and a pension upon retirement. I don't know many people who've lived that life. Neither does the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, which found in 2023, people have an average of 12.7 jobs over their working lifetime. She also said we should be looking at state reports. Let's talk about my home state in New Jersey, shall we? In July of 2019, there was the report of Governor Murphy's task force on misclassification in my home state of New Jersey that kicked off this whole wave of freelance busting we're still enduring today in New Jersey. What we had was a situation of circular report writing, Congressman, where the New Jersey report cites NELP's studies as the foundation for its claims, and then NELP's studies come along and cite the New Jersey report as the basis for its claims. But the foundational data is still really old, and in the New Jersey report, they even mischaracterized other data. The first two lines of the New Jersey report said, misclassification is the practice of illegally and improperly classifying workers as independent contractors rather than employees. This practice has increased by approximately 40% in the last 10 years. Well, the footnote for that 40% in the New Jersey report cites a Harvard Business Review article. The author of that article actually wrote this: the use of independent contracting has grown dramatically over the past decade, with one estimate suggesting it has increased by almost 40%. There is a Grand Canyon-sized difference between those two claims.
And I'm out of time, but the good news is you're going to get to deduct your expenses to come here and talk to us today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Next, we have Ms. Miller from Illinois.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you all to each of our witnesses for their testimony. Before I begin, I'm going to address something that I hadn't planned. Ms. Padin, you just spouted a Democrat lie that we are trying to cut Medicaid. We are not going to cut Medicaid. We are dealing with waste, fraud, and abuse. The American people want us to do that. That is why we won the election. Americans want benefits for citizens and for vulnerable Americans. So I just want to get that out there since we heard that lie spouted again. Excuse me. Independent contractors play a vital role in our economy. Many small businesses are started by individuals who are passionate about something, and independent contracting allows them to pursue their passion while simultaneously investing in local and state economies. In fact, independent contracting allows for increased flexibility from standard 9-to-5 jobs, giving job flexibility to folks like full-time caregivers and stay-at-home moms, individuals who might otherwise be excluded from the workforce Furthermore, independent contracting provides those in retirement with the opportunity to contribute to society while also enjoying time with family and doing things they love. Democrats, on the other hand, seem intent on further regulating this industry, forcing millions to exit the workforce. The first Trump administration implemented a rule to allow more flexibility in independent contracting in January of 2021. While the Biden-Harris Department of Labor overturned that rule last year, it is good to see the new Trump administration returning flexibility to independent contractors and promoting economic growth. So, Mr. Mehrens, your organization represents millions of truck drivers. Could you please explain in more detail how ever-changing labor rules from administration to administration have negatively impacted the trucking industry?
Thank you for the question, Congresswoman. This is what we would refer to as regulatory whiplash. If you don't know what the standard is going to be in the future relative to what it is today, how do you plan? How do you structure your businesses? You know, if you're a hiring entity. If you're an individual, how do you know that you're going to have certainty that the rules that exist for you today, for your vocation, are going to be there in the future? So this causes tremendous difficulty in planning for both individuals and the hiring entities, and there are knock-on effects that come on after that as well. Businesses extend all kinds of capital to pay for lawyers, accountants, and the like to try and figure out where the rules are now, where they're going to be in the future, to do contingency planning. Individuals, in some instances, have that capability. In some instances, they don't. It's much harder on the individual, so it puts them at a disadvantage and makes it much more difficult for them to be in IC.
I can only imagine. Ms. Cavan, could you talk more about how the PRO Act will hurt specific groups of people in freelance industries and how unions have negatively impacted your industry?
Thank you, ma'am. It's nice to meet you, and I've seen you on TV fighting for us. Thank you for what you're doing for independent contractors. The challenge we have with the PRO Act is it contains the ABC test that is based on what happened in California, and I think that anybody who thinks that's a good idea should go and read the report that just came out a few months ago from the members of the California Advisory Committee to the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights. It was a surprise that that report was released. The committee itself didn't release a report. There was some drama behind the scenes, and these members of the committee, after hearing all the testimony, they wrote their own report because they said the world needed to know about the compelling evidence they've heard. Their recommendations were that lawmakers should be extremely cautious before adopting the ABC test at the national level. The experience of California shows that shifting to this test has serious negative consequences. It said states should avoid some of the pitfalls California fell into. It says that further study is needed into the disproportionate impacts of these kinds of labor laws on minorities. So to answer your question, ma'am, the folks pushing these kinds of policies, the folks pushing all this freelance busting, and yes, that does include some of the unions, the impact that it's having on people like us is that it's hurting us. This is not reasonable policy making, and we need Congress to stop it.
Thank you for your testimony, and I just want to say that we are here to fight for choice and opportunity.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Mr. Gruffman from Wisconsin.
Okay, we'll start with Mr. Mehrens. They tried to change President Trump's administrative rule regarding independent workers, the Biden administration from Trump's rule. Would you prefer us to go back for the Trump rule? And can you give us just two quick anecdotes as to why it was better, why more freedom? Obviously, President Trump, a real freedom lover, why it's important to have that freedom for independent contractors?
Thank you, Congressman, for the question. So the Trump-era rule looked at two core factors for determining whether you're an independent contractor under the Fair Labor Standards Act. That's the level of control and entrepreneurial opportunity. These really are the two core factors that get at the ultimate question of whether you're in business for yourself. The other factors are probative of that question, but these two are more probative.
And just give me a real quick example of the type of jobs people do who want the freedom.
In our industry, it's individuals who drive trucks, primarily. Yeah. You know,
A
and
lot of truck drivers are independent contractors, right?
you know, several 100,000 in the nation are independent contractors.
That's a lot.
Yeah, out of several million drivers, yes.
They're free to do it, right? They're making their own choice.
They are absolutely, yes.
What are some of the benefits that people see in the freedom of being an independent contractor?
You own your own business, you set your own hours, you decide what route you're gonna haul, what kind of freight you're gonna haul, what, you know, how often you're home, those kinds of things. You have more freedom than you would have as an individual employee driver. So it's an individual choice, it's up to the individual.
Kind of hate people who hate freedom. Dr. They gave me this one. Palagashvili. Last year, DoorDash announced a pilot program to provide portable benefits to independent workers in Pennsylvania. Georgia also has a pilot program. What are the takeaways you get from the programs?
So thank you for your question, Representative. One of the takeaways that we see from the program is that workers are using the money mostly for time off and emergency savings. That makes sense, given the data that most app-based workers are full-time W-2 employees, so they don't use it to buy health insurance, contributions, and so forth. So that's actually less than 10% of expenses. 89% of the program participants said they're happy with the program. It's been very beneficial to them. And then one other thing that was quite important, because it asked a survey question specifically to these participants, and it asked if you prefer to be independent contractors with these portable benefits or be an employee with DoorDash, with the full benefits that come with being an employee, what would you prefer? 91% of the program participants said that they would want to remain independent. Again, that makes sense because 90% of Dashers only work 10 hours a week on DoorDash because they're employees elsewhere, or they have a full-time job elsewhere. So they're not treating these jobs as full-time W-2 jobs. They might have another job already. They're treating it as side gigs.
You mean there are people out there who don't want them to have this freedom, right?
I think that there is a misunderstanding about the type of workers who are on app-based work. I think there are full-time freelancers like Ms. Cavan over here who are doing it as their full-time job, but the majority of the app-based world is using it as a side gig, and that's clear. There's no murky kind of data here like there is with the misclassification kind of issues that we just heard. The data is pretty clear on this. The IRS is pretty clear on this. Most of those app-based workers are using it as side gigs. The growth that we've seen in independent work through app-based work has been from people who have full-time jobs elsewhere and who are using the app-based platforms as a way to make side income.
Do you think part of the problem is maybe some of these administrators who don't want you to use it as outside income don't understand how many people in our society do have side jobs, and as the result, they don't sympathize with people who need or who just want to work a little harder, need another 10, 12-hour-a-week thing. Do you think that's why they're removed from reality and trying to crack down on this?
I think that's a great question. I would, again, based on my understanding and my research, is that there's a misunderstanding about what is true, what the data is telling us, and then what people who want to come up with solutions think as well. So I think it would be really important for everybody involved to look at the data, look at the research, see what workers are actually doing. And again, you get full-time workers, but the app-based world is mostly side gigs.
That's what I think. Ms. Cavan, did the Biden administration shift from the Trump-era independent contractor rule create uncertainty for businesses and independent workers? And how does that uncertainty affect the average guy's life?
Yes, sir, it did. And the problem is it creates a chilling effect where companies are afraid to work with independent contractors because they can't figure out how to do it and stay within the bounds of the regulatory language.
Okay, how does that affect, say, give me an example of the type of job somebody does who's less likely to be able to do that job because of the uncertainty?
Well, freelance writers. I mean, look at what happened. If you look at what happened in California, we don't even have to imagine. There's a person sitting right behind me, Lisa Rothstein, who's a freelance illustrator in California and got hobbled by the freelance busting law out there. We have, there's thousands of members of these groups that have come forward and said that they're having these problems. So it's not even, we don't have to imagine what's going on. The data is clear at this point. The anecdotal evidence is clear. It's all pointing in the same direction. People are getting hurt.
Okay, and it's just because philosophically, I guess you think the government just likes to pigeonhole everybody into the employee metric just because it results from more control of the government?
Well, what they seem to be doing, especially with the ABC test, is they keep trying to edit it and interpret it in ways that make it stricter and stricter and stricter so that they're actually weaponizing it against people who want to choose to be independent contractors. What the top labor attorney in New Jersey wrote about what they're trying to do with this in my state right now, he said the proposed regulation departs in a dramatic manner from virtually every other test for IC status under federal law and the laws in every state. They're editing it and monkeying with it and trying their level best to make it all impossible for us to be able to function.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
This is
Hard
what
to believe we
happened.
live in
You give
America.
the acting ranking member a minute, and then the next person takes a mile. I'm just kidding. Great questions, and we appreciate the dialogue from everybody, so thank you. We will go to our final questioner of the day. We have Mr. Kiley from California.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There has been in the recent years a all-out assault on the right to earn a living in this country and on workers' rights that began in California and then became national during this last administration. But right now we have an opportunity to not only swing the pendulum back on towards the side of workers, but to keep it there by enacting changes into statute that will actually protect workers' rights and the right to earn a living. I was in California when AB 5 passed. It is probably the single most anti-worker law in modern American history. The Democrat witness just provided a very clear demonstration of that when she attacked the tens of millions of Americans who choose to be independent contractors, saying these aren't good jobs. Never mind the fact that almost everyone who is in those positions says that this is the way, this is the path, the career path that they've chosen for themselves. But you know, in California, when AB 5 passed, the results were immediate. It was the government coming in and directly taking away people's choices and their economic freedom. We talk about DoorDash and Lyft drivers and Uber drivers and folks who are on these platforms, and it was terrible for them, yes, but let's say that you're someone who is good at website design. You wanted to offer those services to the world for people to hire you. The government said, no, you're not allowed to do that. Or let's say you're someone who's good at planning events. You wanted to offer your services as an event planner for weddings or whatever the case may be. No, the government comes in and says, you're not allowed to do that. Let's say you're someone who has a nice white beard and a jolly disposition and you want to offer your services to malls to be a Santa at Christmas time. The government comes in and says you're not allowed to do that, not to mention truckers and realtors and hundreds of other professions. So not only is it an assault on economic freedom, though, we've seen that this law is both politically and economically poisonous. Julie Su, the reason she was installed by President Biden at the Department of Labor is that the Senate rejected her nomination on a bipartisan basis. And I believe it was the oversight of this committee exposing what she had done with AB 5 that was largely responsible for that. What's more, I asked Ms. Su when she was here if she happened to know which state had the highest unemployment. She didn't know, even though she was herself the former labor secretary in California, that the answer was California. I also asked her, did she know what state has the highest poverty rate? She didn't know. The answer was California. I asked her which state had seen the slowest growth in wages for workers. She didn't know that, even though she was the California labor secretary. The answer was California. So, and it's precisely because of laws like AB 5 that have served to diminish opportunity in the state. So, Ms. Caven, you've gone into this a little so far, but you have talked to so many freelancers in your state of New Jersey, certainly in California, across the country. We have Lisa here as one example, who have been harmed so badly by this law and have lost their ability to earn a living, to provide for their families. I remember Vox, which actually editorialized in favor of AB 5. Then they had to stop working with dozens of their writers as soon as the law took effect. Can you share with us a couple other stories of people who have suffered under these restrictions on their rights?
Yes, Congressman. In fact, there's one just out of California this weekend that I was talking with. She runs a nonprofit opera in California, and after AB 5 hit, she got walloped and couldn't keep going, and the state came up with some kind of a fund, money out of the pandemic money to help people like her. Well, Governor Newsom just cut that too. So she's now going out of business now 5 years later after AB 5 because of AB 5. It just took this long to get there. During the pandemic, there was in California music festivals that shut down, and people thought it was because of the pandemic, but it wasn't. They came out and said it was because they couldn't put those music festivals on because of AB 5. Musicians, actors, so many people get affected by this, it's hard to even comprehend. I heard you read the list of more than 600 affected professions in the well of the House of Representatives. It's shocking to people how many different types of professions get affected by this kind of freelance busting. It's horrible.
Yeah, and one of the interesting things about AB 5 is that even its own authors had to acknowledge how truly idiotic the law was by coming back and adding 100 different exemptions. So it's interesting, we hear from the other side, oh no, this is all about protecting workers, so why did you then go in and remove those supposed protections from 100 different professions? What do you make of the fact that the law had to be so amply amended?
I think that Lorena Gonzalez, who was the primary sponsor, came out and said we were right and she was wrong when it came to the freelance writers in California. And what's worse, Congressman Kiley, is when you look at federal legislation like the PRO Act, what's going on with regulatory rulemaking in New Jersey right now, there are no exemptions. So all these awful effects that we've seen in California, that's with more than 100 professions getting partial or full exemptions from that freelance busting. We're not going to have any. We're all going to get hit. This is going to be horrific if this keeps going on, and we really, really need Congress to pass the Modern Worker Empowerment Act to actually protect us.
I couldn't agree more, though I'm slightly biased as the author of that measure. But thank you for your tremendous leadership of the freelancer community and for fighting for workers' rights. Thanks to our friends from Markadis for showing us what we all knew, but now have the empirical evidence for how harmful this law is. And let's pass the Modern Worker Empowerment Act and the Modern Worker Security Act. I yield back.
Thank you. We will now move to closing remarks, and I'd like to recognize the ranking member for his closing statement.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me just say it's very curious that the Republican Party is looking to, well, we'll see what they can do with this bill. I've been just sitting here reading about the trouble over coming to terms over passing this big, ugly tax bill, this big, ugly budget reconciliation bill. But I found it ironic that the way that they're trying to put I guess a nice face on an ugly bill is to try to throw in some things that might attract lower income people to say that there's something in this bill for them. And one of them is, let's not tax overtime pay. But as we know, independent contractors can't take advantage of that provision. They don't get paid overtime pay. And the idea behind this legislation actually is to make employment more about independent contractors, putting people, not under the Federal Labor Standards Act protections for minimum wage, for overtime pay, but to actually narrow the eligibility of the American citizenry who is eligible to overtime pay. So what good is not taxing overtime pay if that's one part of what the right hand is doing, but the left hand is trying to push through legislation to actually make it more difficult to earn overtime pay. Oh, great, on the one hand, we're not going to tax your overtime pay, but on the other hand, we're going to try to make it less possible for you to be someone who can earn overtime pay under the protections of the Fair Labor Standards Act. Now, people say this is about choice. It's about the freedom to choose or freedom to choose. Well, let's understand that good-paying jobs that pay a living wage, that have health care, that have the protections of the Fair Labor Standards Act, meaning overtime pay, meaning safe working conditions, meaning that you can organize and have the benefits of the union. And there's all this fetishization over the good union of the manufacturing jobs that we had during the 1960s and 70s and the 50s. But let's remember that a greater share of those jobs were because unions had greater strength in our country. And workers were able to organize, and unions helped Americans get jobs that allowed them to sustain a family. That type of job is less and less available today. Independent contract work, if that's all that ordinary Americans are able to have, it's not going to be sustainable, and they're not going to have the ability to meet the expenses of all the things they need to do to be an independent contractor. To be an Uber or Lyft driver, to own your own car, well, let's just take the example of the trucker, to independent contractor truckers. Yeah, sure, you can deduct expenses in a way that someone who's an employee cannot, but you've got to be in a very special circumstance, a special set of circumstances or of select circumstances to be able to actually be in, I think, a position of advantage over an employee. I would say for the great majority of ordinary Americans who are in the situation of being independent contractors, they would appreciate, I think, having the opportunity to have the protections of being an employee, financially, for their health, for their safety. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate all of our testifiers who were here today and really enjoyed the vigorous conversation that was had at times. It was a little bit active, but we appreciate the engagement from everybody, both questioners and testifiers. I'll say this in response to the closing statement from the acting ranking member. And what I see on display is that our party, the Republicans, want to support a wide array of job options that are out there for people. We support good-paying, full-time jobs with benefits. That is the overwhelming majority of people in this country, and that works for so many people. But it doesn't work for everybody. And for those other individuals that want to choose to be an independent contractor or a freelancer or participate in the gig economy, they are making that choice because the benefits outweigh all of the negatives or perceived negatives that our opposition has towards these jobs. And so they love the flexibility, they love the extra income that they can be making on the side. They have the choice, and ultimately they are choosing, and 80% of them are saying that they enjoy their work situation. But this is what we see all day, every day in the halls of Congress right now, is that the Republicans in this administration are for all of the American people, and the opposition, the Democrats, want to choose the wrong side of 80-20 issues every single time. And I will let them do that. You can do that. That is your right to be in the 20% minority and say that we want to stop innovation. We want to stop people from being able to do what they choose to do. We want to stop all of these advances that are being made in society today. That is your choice. You can be on the wrong side of those things. And so I think we have an opportunity here as we see that we can provide clarity for the 70 million independent workers across this country to remove barriers that often prevent them from accessing things like portable benefit options. The Modern Worker Empowerment Act would clearly define the law between independent contractor and employee, giving workers more predictability and job creators more certainty. As a previous witness told this subcommittee in March, legislation is a highly preferable way to go about amending the FLSA. I look forward to working with subcommittee members to advance this important bill. The Modern Worker Security Act is a common sense first step to allowing independent contractors to access benefits that can take with them from job to job. This bill makes clear that the presence of benefits does not necessarily make an individual an employee, and my state of Pennsylvania is leading the way in a bipartisan effort to actually allow portable benefits through a landmark pilot program, and it's shown promising results in its early stages. So going forward, I look forward to working with all members of this subcommittee to hopefully advance the interests of all Americans and not be the ones that want to pick and choose what type of job arrangements employees can have at their disposal in our economy. We have a vibrant, dynamic, growing American economy under this legislative body. The Congress, the Republicans, and the Donald Trump administration want empowerment and advances in income for everybody, not just for the tiny few. And with that, I will close by saying that I again would like to thank all of our witnesses for taking the time to stand with the majority, the over 80% of people that want these options. And I will say that without objection, there will be no further business, and the subcommittee stands adjourned.